Hi, I'm Larry,
I'm Gret.
I'm Christy.
and welcome to Dangerous Drag Queens and Other Deviants.
A podcast about the outrageous and sometimes dark world of drag, gender, and sexual identity, and how communities facing stigmatization are making a positive impact just by living their lives out loud.
Brought to you by Virtual Arts.
I'm Gret Gonzalez.
I'm Christy Patty.
My name is Larry Pellegrini, and today we're going to be talking about drag in art through history, through people who have meant something to us. It does have a rich cultural history, um, from cross-dressing to, deliberate parodies of fixed roles of gender and sexuality. And, men have been performing, of course, on stage since the times of the ancient Greeks. In terms of cross-dressing, Shakespeare famously had a lot of women. And then also was reading the Baroque operas featured early examples of drag. Now, the term drag queen was first used to describe men appearing in women's clothing in Polari, a type of British slang that was popularized among gay men and the theater community in the late 19th and 20th centuries. And while drag has long maintained a powerful presence in popular culture, more recently has developed a strong foothold in the art world as well. And we know that, of course, from RuPaul's Drag Race. Gret will speak first about Bonito, but I was taken by, first of all, how beautiful the painting is, but that, Italians, who I don't really think as people who particularly embrace any kind of odd sexual behavior, um, this man painted this.
There's not much known about Giuseppe Bonito, but the painting that Larry's referencing is a beautiful painting, very vividly colored. It's of two gentlemen dressed in female presenting clothing, including jewelry and hats and the like. Bonito was a painter in Naples in the mid 18th century. He worked for the court of Charles III, and this particular painting is very typical of his style. He painted real life, and if you look at his paintings, they range from very well-to-do people from Naples. You could tell there were people in the royal court that he would paint, as well as these very, very commonplace lower economic status people. He painted the Commedia dell'arte, a lot of the theatrical troops and art that was going on in Naples as well. And this particular painting shows two gentlemen again. They are considered what was called femminili. They were thought to bring good luck. They were not looked down upon. You can kind of tell from the word what it was. They were cross-dressers. They were definitely male. They didn't try to hide that they were male, but they dressed as female, and they were considered a third sex. They were not considered male or female. They were considered this third sex that was considered to bring good luck. So when you had a baby, you brought your baby over so that one of the femminellis could hold them and bring them good luck. If you're just listening to us, you can look up the painting yourself if you'd like. But the description is that this one of the men is putting a string of coral beads on the other. And coral was also thought to bring good luck. So it's interesting that, what we think of as having stigmatization over the years definitely did. But in some cases, it was also quite accepted. And in fact, good luck. I should also say you can tell these gentlemen are lower class because one of them is missing a tooth and has a goiter, which was an indication of the fact that they were lower income.
Looking at all of his paintings, I didn't realize that there were so many kings and queens of Italy. But the depiction of this particular painting, which one thing that I really love about it is that the man, if you're looking at the painting on the left side, is very masculine, or it has really rough features in his face. and
Absolutely.
the other one's very feminine. And
Mm,
Yeah.
I wonder sometimes if he hadn't painted this, how much would we know that this even existed in society at the time?
sure, sure.
Right.
That unapologetic slice of life type of artist, certainly at that time everyone was doing their art for like musicians. You hear about Mozart and all these people that were writing at that time. They were writing and producing art for pay, but they were also writing and producing art for themselves. And it's interesting to see in Bonito's work. You can see the very staged portraits that he would do of families and that kind of thing. And then there are these beautiful, vibrant, full of life, almost candid looking paintings. And you can very much tell what he was commissioned to do and what inspired him.
What a fascinating studio it must have been for a couple of days there, or however long. And who knows
I
if they were really even gay? I mean,
yeah.
did he find people and set them up to look like this? Because they kind of look like they could be stand-ins, but
Yeah, that's true. I found it fascinating that this was a really well-known part of the Naples culture and throughout the century. It's just funny culturally to me that it's so regionalized because I was saying this to you guys before. It reminded me so much of the Hawaiian mahu, which is
Mm,
it's something different than transgender, and this seems the same way. The feminine yellows, where it's not male, it's not female, it's just this other thing entirely.
when Juan and I were traveling, maybe even 25 years ago, to some of the smaller villages in Italy and Spain, there was always one Feminiello in the tiniest village. There, you would always see that one person. And of course, living now in Portland, Oregon, I see a lot of Feminiellos, shocking creatures every single day. But then they stood out, but we were the only people looking at them.
sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, they really were. You could feel that they were just a part of that culture and society in many ways, the same way that the Mahus are in
Mm,
Hawaii. Yeah, I loved seeing such a classic look
Mm,
at that.
mm,
You know, with these the feminine yellows, and moving from there, because then I thought, well, okay, who else? Could not really find other artists from that period who painted this subject. And we were in Paris a few weeks ago, and we went to Man Ray's grave, which was in Montparnasse. And then I went back to my room and was looking up more about his life. And so there are two photographs, but of him in a hat. This is himself in drag, which I thought was a really, really, it was almost one of the most beautiful photographs of him that I've ever seen. But I don't think that anybody thought anything unusual about it at that time, because when you look at some of the photographs that were being taken, for the first time, they were showing people in kind of these unusual costumes. And this is around the time that Josephine Baker was there, and at that time, the French were saying that they were tired of civilization.
mm,
mm,
They wanted things to be uncivilized. It was an amazing time, just because people had their creativity encouraged.
mm.
And as I think as we do now, and especially we try to here at Virtual Arts. But there are those two photographs. I don't know who the subject is of the other photograph of Man Ray's, but they really, again, could have been drag queens who lived in drag at the time, because there was a full-on culture of that, or they could have just been dressing up for his photographs, because his subjects were always interesting. But anyway, I loved him, and then that led me to who's somebody who I've always called Diane Arbus. Christy told me this morning that her name is Diane Arbus. Um, Diane,
Deanne.
I
Diane,
never knew.
Diane
I
Arbus.
Learn
didn't
something new every day.
either.
Deanna Arbus was, for me, this was when I moved to Manhattan in 1977. This was the very first book that I bought because I
Mm.
think that I was somehow at a club or something. And not that I didn't know that drag existed because I knew that it existed, but you're kind of in New York and there's all these weird people. And then I went by and there was a book of hers that I still have here. And I was amazed at the subjects of her book. She was born in 1923 and she died in 1971. So she actually died before I moved to New York. And I don't think that I was even aware of that when I really began to follow all of her work. Um, but in this article, it says, unlike most people who go through life dreading they'll have a traumatic experience, the freaks that Deanne Arbus were born with their trauma. So they've already passed their test in life. They're aristocrats. Although this is how Arbus explained her attraction to carnival entertainers, we might imagine her similar language to describe people of unusually large or small stature, nudists, those with developmental disabilities, drag performers, and many others who appear regularly in her portraits. I mean, listen, dangerous drag queens and other deviants. She could have been the guest host. All right. So she was really an extraordinary person. And there's a photograph of hers that I think is really it's a very beautiful photograph, I think. I love that because it's so simple and so
Mm.
proper and so evocative of that time. This is like something my mother would have worn during the 50s. And these two subjects are to me are just really fascinating. Um, because I love that idea she talks about the reality of life. And then the other photograph with the three guys in drag, they're not totally in drag. I mean, I love that one has his shirt off and that kind of beehive hair,
Mhm.
which is just fantastic. In this particular photograph, my favorite part of this photograph is that beehive queen is his hand. And I don't know why, but I look at that hand and I think, what kind of struggles did this person go through? And then, of course, in this particular painting or this particular photograph, I just keep looking at like what's down in that corner, right? What do they have? Is that all their makeup? Like, what is that? But she really captured this disenfranchised person in a really beautiful way. I just think that one of the most fascinating things about these subjects and these artists who took these is that how would we have known that they even existed if these people hadn't spent this time focused on them? They would
Mhm.
have a forgotten part of history, and they they put such a patina on history when you see their faces. So anyway, I love Diane Arbus. If you don't know Diane Arbus, go go look at her photographs. And her photographs are haunting. They're painful to look at, but she just had a way of capturing people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they talk about that a lot, that her style is just affected photography forever because of the way that she approached her subjects. And I read one piece that described it as very intimate because as if she became friends with the subjects and photographed them from that perspective rather than just a slice of life or more presentational work. It was almost like photographing her experiences interacting with these people, which then created an air of authenticity or a visual that was so authentic and intimate that it just really changed perspective on photography forever.
Well, I think that they were subjects that people didn't think that other people were particularly interested in.
Exactly. Right.
Right. I was listening to a piece on her, and she used to hang out in Washington Square Park for a year. She would go through the different levels of people that were there. So there were like the drug addicts in this corner, and then the lesbians were here, and then the hippies were here. And she would like
Mm.
have to kind of meet someone to kind of get into one crowd to then get to the next level of and then would photograph them and kind of start um, talking to them and figuring out who they were. Just fascinating all around. Um,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so interesting on this side of it because so much of what we see now is in terms of photography and portraitures and all the portraits and all those kinds of things are from that perspective. You know, we very rarely see a very staged or formal portrait any longer of anyone, artistically speaking anyway. You know, you might hire someone to paint something like that for over your mantelpiece, but in terms of like an art exhibition or a photographer capturing life, you know, it is very from the inside out. It feels very intimate now. So you know, from this perspective, we almost don't understand how much her work influenced modern photography because we've only known modern photography in that way. So
yeah. I also find it really fascinating that she grew up very affluent. Her parents were pretty rich, and she grew up on the Upper West Side. Her dad owned a big department store. So just that she was drawn to these folks from like this other world from her almost, I think is what maybe captured her imagination about it. She also
yeah,
suffered from depression and anxiety, and she committed suicide is how she died. So
yeah.
who knows what other incredible work we would have if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, and interesting that one perspective of herself on herself was that growing up, she really regretted that she hadn't experienced any adversity. She
Mm.
said the one thing lacking from my childhood, you know, I'm paraphrasing here, but one thing lacking was experiencing adversity. And so apparently she was drawn to that people who innately had adversity in their lives, didn't encounter it, but innately had that in their lives. And you know,
Mm.
turned into a lifelong pursuit for her.
You know, interestingly enough, she had, you know, mental issues and she had depression, which is such can be so debilitating
Mm.
and such a disadvantage of the way to operate in the world. But she used it, you know, and had the fortune of being able to probably have her rent paid for or whatever. But she would do it because I wasn't in New York in 1970 when I was there a few years later, but it was still very much a place of discovery. New York was kind of coming out of that of the 60s, in the 70s, Stonewall, the kind of people saying, we are here to stay. We're not afraid anymore.
And I think that actually segues really nicely into the next person on our list we wanted to speak about, which is Robert Mapplethorpe, who is another New Yorker by birth. He came from Long Island, was born in the 40s, and really was in that New York scene of the 70s that Larry is
Slightly
speaking of.
different life experience. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, a little bit. Maybe not too different. But so he was raised Roman Catholic, which I find hilarious considering his work.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but also loved to use a lot of that symbolism in his work later on. When he was young, he was dating Patti Smith, the musician, and did one of her album covers. That was one of the more famous things he was known for at the beginning of his career. And then he really started becoming into his own with his homosexuality, uh, being in that community more, kind of the Andy Warhol community of artists in New York, and really push the boundaries, going from Arbus, taking photography and just even pushing it to the next level of what it could be. And it really was the time when photography started to be taken seriously as an art form, due in part to Mapplethorpe. He had lots of not controversial pieces, like these gorgeous flowers, but then what he's most well known for is kind of his sexually overt, um, lots of penises,
Lots of
basically. But he also has a couple of really well known photographs of himself in drag. So he also was bringing that to the forefront.
speaking of pieces, at that time, I mean, the only penis I'm sure you ever saw was, in an X-rated magazine.
That's interesting because one of the things you read about Mapplethorpe is that the reason that he became a photographer at all was that he was initially a multimedia artist creating collages, and as many of them were at that time, creating art from other
Mhm.
objects and images. And he would use images from pornography, and
Mhm.
he was realizing he wasn't finding the kinds of images that he wanted for these collages that he was building. So that's the only reason he took up photography in the first place, was to find the right. Well, it's all driven by the penis, isn't it? Most everything is.
There's something about the penis. Yes.
Most
Well,
everything, no, but many, many things.
um, I know that, as somebody who, I guess I'm, around his age. Is he dead? He's dead.
He died in the late 80s of AIDS.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Um, so when I was growing up, you know, the only way you got your rocks off was National Geographic. Okay. And you
That
hope
one
that
magazine,
Ah,
that one issue of that one magazine.
this from some tribe, and you're like, oh my God, did you? I mean, I don't know. I probably didn't show it to anybody, but there was nothing. There really was
sure.
nothing.
Right.
You know, thank God for Robert Mapplethorpe. He made the penis palatable.
He certainly wasn't afraid of it, that's for sure.
It was a very dynamic time. And I think for these people to be able to photograph even one person in drag, to have it be even appreciated at that time, was pretty extraordinary. They were just showing what what they decided that they wanted to show. They weren't censoring anything. So
Right, and they weren't exploiting anyone. Well,
like,
Mapplethorpe pushed that boundary, and certainly that's a topic for another podcast. He did tend to push the edges of that, which made him so controversial and so famous. But yeah, it was just a way of showing life outside of the norm, and thank God for him, because now that's paved the way for so many people.
it really has. It has. And the only other photograph that I wanted to show was from, I can't really find anything about this person other than the person's name, which is Conrad Ventur. But there's this modern photograph, and I guess I'm saying it's modern because it's from 2012. But this photograph of drag, somebody in drag, to me is just so gorgeous, in this background of, it's New York City. Just, it's beautiful, and I love this photograph. And we don't see this type of drag that much anymore, because drag has kind of become not a clown show, but exaggerated characters that, I'm sure that for today, and for, the appetite of people today, it is obviously it's right for them, because they're, that's what's being purchased. But it's not drag in the way that this was. It's a little bit more performance art today. So I'm really happy that, at least in our lifetimes, we were able to see what I would call, real drag.
And when I looked up Ventur, I found that he's working on this multi-year project where he's going back and trying to find all of Warhol's kind of folks that are still alive, to interview them and find out what that experience was like for them. And I mean, brought up exploitation before. A lot of them feel like they were perhaps exploited, but in that community were a lot of drag queens and
Mm.
gender fluid folks. And so I love that he's kind of continuing that
Yeah.
tradition of Warhol. And
He's got some fascinating projects, because
yeah.
he has a green project too.
Yep, yep.
Which,
This photo is of a drag queen from the 70s, a Puerto Rican drag queen from the 70s,
uh,
who disappeared and has now reemerged, and that is all I know about it. But it is an absolutely stunning photo of a stunning person. Gorgeous. We'll have to do a deeper dive on whoever this beautiful human is,
Yes,
what their
absolutely.
story is and was.
That would be fantastic. I look at some of these photographs and I wonder, how old are these people today? Especially when looking at, Diane Arbus's photographs. They're,
Like those twins, right? The famous twins, the Dan Arbus
Yes.
twins. It's like, oh, I wonder where they are today.
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it would be fascinating to see that. Thank you. I think that this was really great, and I love the opportunity about putting this in the context of artists and the capturing of these photographs from this time, so that to give us something to speak about on this platform.
Well, being this is our last episode of this year, I thought maybe we could go around and say if there's anything we're looking forward to next year or any New Year's resolutions you guys have.
Ooh, that's a good question, Christy. I will say, as a representative of the only representative of Nevada on this screen and on this podcast at the moment, that I'm very excited about next year's Play Festival. We have all Nevada writers. It's going to be highlighting 3 different writers from our hometown, our home area. So we're very excited about that moving forward.
It was difficult to find writers
It
in
was
Nevada, but who we found are gems.
stellar, just
Yeah, we
stellar.
got amazing playwrights.
The
Yeah,
pieces are completely varied, really unrelated in such a wonderful way, and very the writers are similar. All different age ranges, different genders, different backgrounds. Very, very exciting. Very, very exciting for next year.
So I'm looking forward to continuing our script lab and seeing what comes of that. We've decided that Larry Pellegrini and our good friend Concettarella are each tackling a project, and we're really delving into what the process is like on that. And the conversations have been fascinating, and I look forward to seeing how it all plays out.
Yeah, Script Lab is brand new for everyone, so keep an eye out for that.
yeah, and I think that at some point we'll be able to invite people to look at our process, which is going to be, I think, fun for those people. It's going to be fun for me to relook at it. So there will be a project about Tony and Tina's wedding from the viewpoint of my experience and what it was like as a director in the beginning to direct that piece, and then my journey through the United States, to all of these different cities, you know, from New York City to Chicago to Boston to to Maui, San Juan, Puerto Rico. I mean, so many places, and developing that story, particularly in that market for that group of Italians, and by really looking into those Italian areas. It was
Mm.
fascinating. I loved that part of it, and I had the good fortune to be able to go out and see a lot of those areas that no longer exist. And it'll cover like a 35-year period. So I'm excited about that.
Me
Mm.
too.
Millions of episodes possible with all the stories from
Gazillion.
that journey.
Thank you both so much. It's been a pleasurable year, and look
It
forward
sure
to
has.
another.
Yeah. See you in 2025.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Dangerous Drag Queens and Other Deviants, as well as Virtual Arts on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. And be sure to check us out at www.virtualartsproductions.org for all our latest projects.
And if you like what you hear, please share it with a friend. That's all for now. Keep living dangerously and on your own terms.